What's going on, guys, and welcome to my audio review for the final Friday Night SmackDown on Fox for September 6, 2024. I'm Graham G. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great weekend so far. It was indeed an end of an era on Friday night. The final SmackDown on Fox after almost exactly 5 years. SmackDown headed back to USA Network starting next week. And what a 5 years it's been. I'll just say this starting off the review here, because there's been a lot of chatter this week about the Fox partnership, sayonara, because the constant blackouts and the bleeping and even the occasional preempting of the show, which I do not miss for my first few years of watching SmackDown when it was on maybe the CW, I think it was on UPN or My Network TV9, I'm pretty sure is what it was when I first started watching SmackDown in the late 2000s. Not every week, but there were several weeks, and this hasn't happened in a while for modern-day SmackDown, to my knowledge, but I would go to, the recording for the show, and it would be preempted by baseball, and there would be no way to catch back up on the show, over DVR, without finding it online or whatever. And that happened with the Fox era of SmackDown as well, soon after they joined Fox, probably even as recently as a few years ago, and even watching live as well. It was just super annoying to turn on Fox and they would still be airing a baseball game from a few hours earlier. And that wasn't a widespread issue. That was largely an issue dealt with, local stuff, like local games, like Mets games and stuff like that, local sports stuff, at least here in the Northeast. But it was annoying on occasion. That was kind of the least of my concerns with the Fox era of SmackDown. Really, it's become an issue of the constant blackouts and the bleeping. The bleeping happens even on USA Network with NXT, so it's not even as if once they go to USA Network next week, all of this will be, a thing of the past. They will probably still do occasional blackouts, but even on this show on Friday night, it was a massive issue. I mean, in Bayley versus Tiffany alone, and again, something probably happened, it might have been a wardrobe malfunction, but we don't know, but there's been cases in the past even, where it's just simply been signs in the crowd or chanting, which again, happens. But when it's every 2 seconds and it's constantly taking away from the show, and we saw that for this episode as well, it's fucking obnoxious. So I honestly can't really blame people for wanting SmackDown to leave Fox. That being said though, being on the Fox platform for the last 5 years has given WWE a lot more exposure to an audience they probably did not have previously. They definitely did not have previously. I mean, SmackDown was, I think, probably doing its highest numbers on Fox than it's done maybe in 10 or 15 years on any other network, whether it be Sci-Fi or, again, I don't know about My Network TV9 15 years ago or, UPN 20 years ago, but I'm talking the CW, Sci-Fi, even USA Network previously. They were doing higher ratings on Fox now than they were ever doing on those networks in the last 10, 15 years. And again, I even tweeted this, last night, I think, or yesterday, or whatever day it was, that there were definitely people that I know do not watch wrestling that then became aware of what SmackDown was doing, what was going on SmackDown, and just WWE in general, because they would constantly promote WWE more than you would probably expect them to during the baseball games and football games, just by it being on Fox, because it's a Fox property. And they held up their end of the bargain. WWE probably did not. I mean, there is a reason why the partnership is ending. WWE is getting a lot of money for SmackDown to go back to USA Network. But if Fox had this grand, lucrative deal for them to stay, then they definitely would have stayed. They're definitely making more money from going back to USA Network, but the ratings will not be the same. The exposure will not be the same. I would be surprised if SmackDown maintained the exact same amount of viewership they're doing currently on Fridays on Fox that they will soon be doing on USA Network on Friday nights. I doubt that's going to happen. But I mean, as far as the Fox partnership, not going to shit, but the fact that it's not being renewed, WWE itself, I mean, again, we complain about the blackouts and the bleeping and stuff like that. The WWE product itself is kind of to blame for the fact that it's not being renewed. Now, as of late, SmackDown has been better. This show is a whatever show, we'll get into that momentarily. But the last 2 years, SmackDown's been better. For the last 5 years, it's really been the Roman Reigns / Bloodline show. And that has been the constant factor that has carried this blue brand for the past 5 years, dating back to the first episode 5 years ago, which was such a mixed bag. That was when I started doing these SmackDown reviews, because it used to air on Tuesdays, and it was a lot easier to just talk about it with Raw and Wrestle Rant Radio on Thursdays, but then they moved to Fridays, and SmackDown's still a significant show that I want to talk about and review, so I did these separate SmackDown reviews starting 5 years ago. And those early shows were such a fucking mixed bag. I mean, a lot of those early Fox shows, I would not be shocked, were really what killed SmackDown's, any chance of them being picked up. They were really, really lucky to get that Fox deal when they did. And SmackDown wasn't even white hot 6-7 years ago when they first signed that Fox deal. So the fact they even ended up on Fox is honestly kind of amazing, because the WWE product is a whole lot hotter now than it was back in 2018 when they made that deal happen. The fact that Fox threw as much money as they did at this company for this fucking show, in its current state, totally understandable. But, we're talking late 2019. 2020, yes, had COVID. But even before COVID, the show was among some of the worst quality that SmackDown has ever produced, consistently. I mean, you can go back and listen to my reviews from that period, from the dog food shit, to Goldberg as champion beating The Fiend, Brock beating Kofi in a matter of minutes, Cain Velasquez, remember that old bullshit from late 2019? I mean, that was SmackDown in a nutshell in 2019-2020. And again, they had the Thunderdome stuff to deal with, but that was kind of an issue they couldn't avoid due to the pandemic. But even in 2021, when they got back on the road, SmackDown wasn't really that hot of a show for more than a little while when they got back in front of live crowds. Vince McMahon was still running the ship in mid-2022 before Triple H took over for Vince. That show, again, was still some of the worst programming they were doing from week to week. Dare I remind you of Jinder and Shanky dancing every week and all the other bullshit that we were subjected to during that period. So again, it has improved in the last 2 years. But it got to a point where USA Network was just a whole lot more willing to pay them what they thought they were worth for this show compared to what Fox was probably willing to have them stick around. I mean, it may have been a case where, like I just said, they were offering a certain amount and NBC was just simply willing to pay more money than Fox was, which makes total sense. But again, if the Fox deal was so blowaway, much better than NBC's, then they would have stayed on Fox. And it could have been a case where Fox was not willing to renegotiate and did not want to keep them around on the network. It wasn't really what they were expecting when they signed up for SmackDown 5 years ago or 6 years ago, whatever. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, they're headed to USA Network starting again next week. And hopefully it can kind of limit the amount of blackouts that we see on the show, the bleeping. I don't even know if that would completely go away on Netflix. I would imagine it would. I mean, I doubt we go back to a PG-14 product. I know there was that report earlier this week, from Fightful, actually, which is obviously a credible source, and they had mentioned there was a and it actually might have been PW Insider, but either way, there was a credible report this past week that indicated there was a mandatory talent meeting backstage of Raw this week where they were told that they couldn't swear on camera or maybe not flip people off or whatever, which is what we see in AEW all the time from Okada and stuff like that. But I guess they were told, in case there's a camera in front of you, to be more weary of swearing on the show, because it's still a PG product. Technically. I mean, they really haven't abided by those rules in a long time, strictly anyway. But, that tells me that that's probably not going away. I don't think it's going to become that much edgier of a product during the Netflix era. It could. As of right now, it will not be, at least for the next couple of months. Now, that's Raw. SmackDown's still on USA. So there's nothing stopping them if they hear a chant that's too vulgar or whatever, which is what we see on NXT. NXT is not immune to this either. Where if there's a holy shit chant, they'll try to bleep it out, and it's just so fucking obnoxious. And I don't really understand what the difference is between now and even a year or two ago when they weren't doing that. I mean, they have never done that up until the last year or two, so I don't really know what changed, but hopefully on USA it will be better. This was not a phenomenal farewell, no pun intended. AJ Styles was not on the show. This was not a hot farewell for SmackDown on Fox. It was a pretty standard show, all things considered. But it did do a decent job of setting up a few matches for next week's season premiere, is what they call it. Also building towards more matches, probably a Bad Blood between Bayley and Nia Jax for the WWE Women's Championship, and potentially a triple threat for the United States Championship too. So I'm looking forward to that. A couple of those matches probably come Bad Blood. They could do them before then, but Nia and Bayley were not on the Bash in Berlin show. They had their match at SummerSlam. If they're not doing their rematch next week, that tells me they're probably saving it for the pay-per-view. And then the Triple Threat United States Championship match. We're getting Carmelo Hayes and Andrade Part 5 next week. If they're not waiting until Bad Blood for that, they should be waiting until Bad Blood to do the triple threat. That's what I would do. We open this show with Solo Sikoa confronting Cody Rhodes, wanting another shot at the Undisputed WWE Championship. Now, this wasn't really a surprise, considering Solo has been saying for weeks in the build-up to Bash in Berlin and coming out of it, I want next for the Undisputed WWE Championship, and sure enough, he is next in line for a shot at that championship, despite doing nothing to deserve another opportunity. I don't think Solo's even had a match beyond the one that he had on this show, winning for his team, which he obviously needed that victory, and it made that match even all the more obvious. He needed that win to set up that match for next week. I just said this before, I just have minimal interest in another Solo and Cody match. I know they did it at SummerSlam. I actually was not down on that match as much as most people, but the build was largely boring, paint-by-number stuff. They had a match on SmackDown a couple of months ago. That was brief. That was when Jacob Fatu debuted. They also had their match on SmackDown, or on Raw, rather, right before WrestleMania a year ago. That was good. That was back when Solo Sikoa meant a bit more, and he was undefeated, felt like a force. He's lost a lot of luster since then. They've really been trying to build him up as the big force on SmackDown, the top heel. This is why they need to turn either Owens or Orton very, very soon, because they need more credible heels on this show. They're trying with Solo, and it's a valiant effort, to a certain extent anyway, but I just cannot buy him as the next world champion. He is not winning next week, and honestly, if they not only did they set up that match for next week's show, which is a worthy attraction for the show, I get it. It's probably the first time that we've had a WWE Championship match on SmackDown, I would think, since Roman Reigns and Matt Riddle 2 years ago, back in June of 2022. I don't think Roman defended the championship on TV after that, and Cody so far on television anyway, he's had matches on SmackDown, but not any championship defenses. So I think it's the first WWE title match or world title match of any kind, to my knowledge, on SmackDown in 2.5 years, which is cool. And it's also going to be a steel cage match. Now, Nick Aldis emerged during the segment to announce it will be a steel cage match to prevent interference from the Bloodline. Now, whereas at SummerSlam they invited interference for the Bloodline rules match, that's what Cody Rhodes challenged Solo Sikoa to, they're going to make it a steel cage match to theoretically get rid of or eliminate the factor of interference, which is just simply not going to happen. If they're going down the road, which I expect them to, of Roman Reigns costing Solo again, then I honestly don't really understand what the point of all of this is. We just saw that at SummerSlam, and what makes it even more goofy is that you have a cage. Now, granted, we're not stupid. We have seen steel cage matches before in WWE and other companies where it really essentially invites interference and doesn't discourage interference. That's just the way that these matches work. But just to have it play out the exact same way with Roman coming out, we have not seen in a couple of weeks since the Bloodline took him out. Not on the SmackDown after SummerSlam, but the week after that, we have not seen him in like 3 weeks. To have Roman come out and cost Solo again is just fucking lazy. I mean, I know they probably wanted to give Roman more time off. He's had another death in the family. That totally makes sense. I'm not going to be one of those people that says, oh, Roman should be around. He needs to be more full-time. Who gives a shit? It would be nice, but, you know, the circumstances are what they are. Just whatever. They're working with what they have. But to have the storyline progress in the exact same fashion would just be fucking lazy. So I hope they don't do that. But we'll see. At least they set that match up for next week. Can't say I'm overly excited for it. I would have been more excited for, like, even Rhodes and Owens again. Orton was not on this show. Orton lost to Gunther at Bash in Berlin, failing to win the World Heavyweight Championship. So I assume at some point he will be next up for a shot at that title. I still want to see either him go heel or Owens, preferably Orton. I mean, maybe even both, but you still need some top baby faces towards the top of the card. You have LA Knight, but he's currently the United States champion, so you need to turn either Owens or Orton imminently. You can't wait much longer, because Solo is just not that guy. The first match on the show, Bayley versus Tiffany Stratton, was a good match. It marked their first ever one-on-one encounter. They did feud going into Backlash earlier this year for the WWE Women's Championship. Bayley beat Tiffany and Naomi in a triple threat match at Backlash for that belt to retain it. She pinned Naomi to retain, though she and Tiffany never had that one-on-one match during that brief rivalry back in the spring. And it was a good match. I thought they worked well together here. Tiffany being made to look credible in defeat by lasting as long as she did in the ring with Bayley, the former WWE Women's Champion. And the Nia Jax thing, I mean, the crowd was kind of quiet for parts of it because they probably knew Nia was coming out. I mean, Nia even said, oh, maybe I'll walk down to ringside and get involved in the same way that you did in my match last week, where her interference almost backfired. Nia's involvement in this match did indeed backfire. Tiffany ended up losing off that distraction, actually. Bayley was supposed to be distracted, used it against them, and ended up winning the match. So Bayley wins. I still think, like I said earlier, that we're headed towards Bayley and Nia Jax again for the WWE Women's Championship at Bad Blood. From there, you can move on to Nia and Charlotte, or she'll probably be back soon. I've seen the reports. It just makes the most sense to have her back on SmackDown, probably feuding with Nia. I know their last match on Raw 2-3 years ago was just fucking awful. That was when they were like shooting on each other. Someone shared a clip on Twitter recently of that match. It was terrible. One of the worst Raw matches I've seen in some time. So hopefully, and they've just never had great chemistry. So you know that we're getting Charlotte and Nia at some point, but if we do get it, hopefully they have better chemistry. I mean, and also Nia's improved since she's been back. So hopefully they have better chemistry the next time they lock up compared to a couple of years ago, or even 7 years ago, when Charlotte tried to do a moonsault and she completely missed Nia, so Charlotte I think Nia caught her and she almost dropped her. I don't know, it was bad. They've just never really had good matches. But you gotta figure that we are gonna get Charlotte and Nia at some point. Queen of the Ring versus the Queen. It just makes sense. So, good match there from those two, I thought. We had the grand re-debut of Giovanni Vinci on this show. All right? They've been airing these vignettes for weeks. The premiere, the debut, the return, whatever you want to call it, of Giovanni Vinci on SmackDown. He was drafted to SmackDown back in the spring after being attacked by Imperium, either on the draft show or the week before the draft show. We have not seen him on the show since in this form, aside from vignettes. And I was excited to see him get a real shot to shine, because the last shot that he got to shine on his own was back in NXT 2 years ago. And at that point, it was the wrong call to break up Imperium, just because they had a lot left in the tank, and we got to see that on the main roster recently, which was great. But they wanted to move in a different direction, get Vinci out of there, and put him on his own on SmackDown. Great. They repackaged the guy, looks like a star, has a very cool entrance. The bell rings, and in a matter of moments, he gets pinned by his opponent, Apollo Crews. Now, in a way, I'm not defending it. I thought this was stupid. In a way, it almost makes sense. And I don't think they did this on purpose. I doubt they did this on purpose, because they didn't even acknowledge it to my knowledge. But the last person that Vinci faced on his own when he was on his own in NXT was Crews. I think he actually won that feud, did Vinci. He beat Crews on his way out, and then went back to the main roster as part of Imperium. So if they want to rekindle that rivalry, even then, I don't care. Because to the main roster audience, Crews is just a stepping stone. He largely loses a lot of his matches. He rarely wins. You need to give the guy a win at some point. But listen, if the idea is to give Crews some credibility and then rebuild Vinci back, rebuild him. He was never really at a certain point to begin with. But if you want to build him up by having him attack Apollo, show more of an edge, more aggression, whatever, and then he beats down Crews and gets over that way, I suppose, but that just feels like counteractive or counterproductive booking to me. When you can just have him go in there on night one, have a fun match with Crews, show off what he can do in the ring, and just beat him decisively. I don't really understand what the issue with that is. So I thought this was stupid. I am in the majority here who thought this was dumb. It did feel like an attempted burial. I don't know what Vinci did. I saw the rumors of maybe he was trying to hit on Tiffany when she was with Ludwig. I saw that bullshit. I don't really put much stock in that. I don't really know why they would go through the trouble of trying to hype him up through all these vignettes, only to have him lose as quickly and as decisively as he did. It was just, he was distracted. That was the point. I should mention that he was taking off his jacket or whatever. Crews rolled him up quickly and then picked up the victory. But there are other ways of doing this sort of stuff without having the guy lose in a matter of seconds. It just makes him look like an idiot. So again, they can build him up with wins, and this isn't the death of Vinci, but it felt like he could have been. I guess we'll find out what the fallout is. If we never see the guy again or he loses the next match, then he's just a fucking loser on this show. Then he's just an enhancement talent. But in that respect, they would never really be giving him a chance. If that was the case, they would never be giving him a chance to try to get over on his own. Will he? I'm not sure. I think Vinci's perfect to the mid-card level. He'll never be like a world champion, but in the ring, the guy can go. And he just loses so many matches where it's hard to take him seriously. But this isn't exactly a stellar start to his SmackDown stint as a single star. A lot of S's there, I understand, but I thought this was stupid. We'll see where they go with it. I'm not completely giving up on it yet. I probably should be, but this was fucking dumb. I should mention this too. I forgot to mention this earlier when I mentioned the whole Fox, SmackDown on Fox era or whatever. They did air a video package actually, honoring SmackDown's 5 years on the network, which was cool that they showed that and acknowledged it and whatever. The video package itself, it was well done, but it was funny watching it. A lot of the highlights were from that first show on Fox 5 years ago when The Rock showed up, and they didn't show the Brock beating Kofi thing, nor should they have, because that was stupid. It was a nice, shocking moment at the time, and I didn't even hate the Cain Velasquez thing at the time, because I thought, oh, that's kind of cool that they're trying that or doing it or whatever. But the match with Kane and Brock sucked, and we never saw Kane in WWE again after that, so it was a complete waste of time. So, yes, in retrospect, it was pretty bad. That was dumb. That first show was a mixed bag. Got over 4 million viewers, and SmackDown, I don't think, ever hit those heights again. They got 3 million viewers for a post-Christmas show a couple of years ago. It was right after Christmas football or whatever. But I think that first show got 4 million. They never did those numbers again. Not even close. Not even half that, I don't think. They've done 2 million, but I don't know what the exact number was, but it was pretty high. Anyway, so a majority of the video package showed highlights from that first show, and then really just this past year, when Terrence Crawford was in the ring knocking out Theory and Waller. That was a month ago. They showed the segment where Jalen Brunson and, God, I don't remember the other man's name. The other basketball player. I'm terrible with fucking names of sports athletes. But the segment they did in MSG on SmackDown, I was there actually in late June, where they faced off. That was a great moment. That was 3 months ago, though. A lot of the Bloodline stuff that has been in the last 2 years, it felt like a majority of the video package was Bloodline, which it should be, because they've really been the blue brand for the past 5 years, like I said. They have been the saving grace of SmackDown since 2019. And that early Roman stuff was awful. They left out the Brock beating Kofi thing. Anything with Brock they left out, because he's not, persona non grata currently in WWE is Brock, so that's why they didn't acknowledge him. But he's been a part of a lot of big moments on SmackDown in the past 5 years. Him going after Roman with a tractor. The whole Brock and Roman feud was not acknowledged at all because of that, unfortunately. Edge's time on SmackDown when he was around, not acknowledged because, again, he's an AEW guy. Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, not acknowledged because he's an AEW guy. The dog food shit they didn't acknowledge, nor should they have. That was awful. No clips, not a single shot, I don't think, from the Thunderdome. They did mention the Thunderdome, Corey Graves did, when they were setting up the video package, but they didn't show anything from the Thunderdome, which makes sense because that was one of the darkest periods in wrestling because of how, depressing it was with no crowds and shit like that. Although they did make the most of it to their credit. So, nothing from that period, which was a year and a half. Nothing from early 2022. If you really sit there and think about it, and I can't even do an article about it or a list. It would be really tough to do so. Because when you really sit there and think about the top moments of SmackDown on Fox, what really comes to mind? I would guarantee you almost every single moment that comes to mind is Bloodline related. There has been good stuff on SmackDown this year, even last year, but the well runs dry beyond the Bloodline stuff, or anything relating to the Bloodline. Cody Rhodes has been on SmackDown for a couple of months. SmackDown's it's had its moments this year. Even the Jacob Fatu debut back in June or whatever was great. That was a really great moment. That's a Bloodline moment. Anything with the Bloodline has really dominated this show. Gunther they showed actually winning the Intercontinental title. I don't know if they showed Ricochet, because now he's in AEW, but Gunther did begin his record-setting reign on SmackDown 2.5 years ago, back in June of 2022. So that happened, but there really wasn't a whole lot else that really comes to mind as far as top SmackDown moments on Fox in the past 5 years. That's sad. There's been some good stuff with the Bloodline. SmackDown has had some great moments, especially over Raw. Not a lot of great Raw moments in the past 5 years either, aside from the last year or two that Triple H has been in charge. But the last 5 years, that would include 2019, 2020, 2021, early 2022. A lot of that was just mediocre, awful, if not just outright forgettable television. So it's kind of hard to think about the highlights from this period without just thinking of the Bloodline. That's really about it. The Bloodline was SmackDown for those 5 years. So I just thought the video package was well done. It was cool. They acknowledged their time on Fox, but it also illustrates how dull the show would have been without the Bloodline. It would have been 10 times worse at a lot of different periods in the past 5 years. We had a triple threat match with Kevin Owens and Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. Just when you think you've seen every iteration of Owens against these two, they throw them in a triple threat match. Can we move on from Owens versus Theory and Waller? My God, it feels like every week he has had matches with these two for the last year. Owens arrived on SmackDown during the season premiere last October. I think it was like week 2, if not week 1, that Owens interacted with these two individuals. He has faced them in singles matches, many tag team matches. Can we move the fuck on from this feud? I mean, or at least turn Owens heel so we don't have to see this shit anymore. The match was good. The crowd was into it. Owens is over, obviously. You knew Owens was going to win. He won again. I don't think we have seen a single match that Owens has had with Theory and Waller where Owens lost. Whether it be this, or a singles match, or a tag team match, or whatever. He has won every single match. And that does not change next week. He has another match with these two on next week's show. He's facing Theory and Waller again in a tag team match with a mystery partner. I'll give you $10 to realize, or rather to bet on, who you think that could be. It's probably Randy Orton. I mean, it could be another individual that we're not thinking of. I almost guarantee you it's Randy Orton coming back to SmackDown because of how close he and Owens are and have been in recent months. Unless this ends in Orton just RKOing Owens out of nowhere, a lot like Triple H did to Ric Flair on that season premiere of Raw on USA Network like 20 years ago. That was cool. Do something like that to shake it up. Owens and Orton beating Theory and Waller in another tag team match does nothing for me. Who cares? What I do care about, though, LA Knight coming out to the ring, being interrupted by Andrade and Carmelo Hayes, both having their sights set on the United States Championship. Andrade and Hayes have had a hell of a series of matches in the past couple of weeks, dating back to right after Money in the Bank in July. They are currently tied with 2 wins apiece. They're going to have their 5th and probably deciding rubber match, whatever you want to call it, on next week's show. But this segment told me, unless that match is a number 1 contenders match for the United States Championship, which I don't think it is, that the feud will not end next week. It might have a decisive winner. It could be like a double countout or a LA Knight getting involved or whatever, double DQ. I feel like, and it should be at Bad Blood for the United States Championship, LA Knight, Andrade, and Hayes in a triple threat match. Andrade and Hayes, their series of matches has gotten so good, it's a bummer they're not having their 5th match at the pay-per-view. But you can argue like it's a mid-card feud, shouldn't be on a pay-per-view over a mid-card title match. Well, you get the best of both worlds. We can get Knight, Hayes, and Andrade all in the ring for the same match at that pay-per-view. That's what I would do. Knight should walk out still champion. I don't know. He just won the belt, so I wouldn't take it off of him this soon. But that's what I would do at Bad Blood. Knight, Andrade, Hayes. He laid out Andrade and Hayes here. He stood tall, but we'll see what happens next week in that 5th and final, quote-unquote final match, we'll see. But I still do think the feud continues beyond that point, and we get a triple threat for the title with these 3 men at the pay-per-view. Chelsea Green shockingly beating Michin. Now, Michin lost to Nia Jax last week, failing to dethrone her as the WWE Women's Champion. I thought this would be like a rebound win for her. Chelsea Green won instead, with help from Piper Niven, mind you, but still a win is a win. The match was fine, didn't get a ton of time, crowd was kind of quiet. Michin's got a lot of television time this year, which is great. She's received a ton of television time. But she's still not, like, super over. Depends on who she faces. Green is an entertaining character, but she also is one of the best parts of SmackDown, but she's also in the process of being established and getting over. So the crowd was kind of quiet. The match was okay. But Green winning was an encouraging sign. I know Tiffany had mentioned her earlier in the show because Chelsea might be spreading rumors that Tiffany's going to cash in on Nia, blah, blah, blah. Could we see Nia and Chelsea Green at some point? That's why they gave Chelsea Green the win here. I would like to see this capitalized on and not just see go nowhere. She had a great showing at Money in the Bank. They haven't really done a whole lot with her since then. I think she went on to lose to Bianca Belair in like fucking 30 seconds a few weeks ago. That was just stupid. What was even the point? Like a month ago or whatever it was. If they give her a real push coming out of this, then I'm on board. Chelsea Green has gotten very good. She's very entertaining. She's a great character on the show, so I was happy to see her win here. The Bloodline in the main event. We close out the SmackDown Fox era with the Bloodline, only fitting, with them beating the Street Profits and DIY in an 8-man tag team match. This was really good. I thought it was the best thing on the entire show, actually. Best match on the show, nicely paced, great action, crowd was into it. A lot of offense from the baby faces on the heels. It's not like they were just straight up squashed by the Bloodline. But the Bloodline did win decisively with Solo pinning Montez Ford to close out the show. No Roman Reigns, no Cody Rhodes. That was really just the end of it. And that was the show. So, kind of a basic main event. They didn't really have anything sexier to close the show with, but, it was fun for what it was, and it actually ended up being the best thing on the show, which tells you not how great that match was, but how dull the rest of the show was, at least in my opinion. Wasn't a fan of the Vinci loss. I thought that was stupid. Bayley and Tiffany had a good match. We'll see where they go with Bayley and Nia Jax next. Cody and Solo, they set it up well. I just don't really care. But it is a fine attraction for next week's season premiere, and it's cool they're defending the championship on the season premiere. I think that's cool too. But everything else was pretty paint-by-number stuff, although they did do an efficient job of progressing some storylines as we head into not only the season premiere next week, but also Bad Blood coming up in a couple weeks, in like 4 weeks' time, on October 5th. So thank you guys for checking out my final Fox SmackDown review. We started doing these SmackDown reviews with the Fox era 5 years ago. We're going to continue with the USA Network as well starting next week, so keep an eye out for that. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. I'm Graham G. Matthews. Enjoy the weekend, folks, and I'll catch your ass down the road.